Ethan didn't believe in the paranormal, not really, but after 3 nights trapped in his own body, unable to scream while something watched him from the dark corner of his room, belief wasn't a choice anymore. It was survival. It started the night I moved into my new apartment. I had just left a rough patch in life: job loss, a breakup, and a sense that I needed to escape everything familiar. The apartment was cheap, a little too cheap for its location, but I didn't care. I needed a fresh start, and the quiet, unassuming studio in an aging building downtown seemed perfect. The place was small but clean enough. White walls, creaky floorboards, a narrow kitchenette, and a single window facing the alley. I moved in with only 2 suitcases and a mattress still wrapped in plastic. That first night, I felt uneasy. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a low-level tension humming in the background. I assumed it was just the change, the new environment. The building had an odd smell, kind of like wet plaster and dust, but I figured old places all had their quirks. I tried to relax, watched something on my phone until I got tired, then turned off the light and lay down. That's when the air felt heavier, like the temperature dropped a few degrees the moment the room went dark. It was about 3 a.m. when I suddenly woke up. At first I thought it was a noise, maybe someone in the hallway or the refrigerator clicking on, but it wasn't that. My eyes were open. I could see everything. The dim glow from the street lamp through the curtain, the faint outline of the door, the small table with my phone still charging. But something was wrong. I couldn't move. I lay there, frozen. I couldn't lift my arms, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. My breathing was shallow and fast. I felt like I was being crushed, like something unseen was pressing down on my chest. I tried to will myself to move, to scream, but my body ignored every signal. Panic surged through me in waves. My heart pounded so loud it sounded like it was echoing in my skull. Eventually, though, it felt like an eternity, I could move again. It was like someone had flipped a switch. My arms shot up. I gasped, and I sat upright, drenched in sweat, chest heaving. The room looked the same. Nothing out of place. No sign of anything, but I felt violated, like something had touched me without ever being seen. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat up against the wall with the light on, scrolling through my phone, trying to find explanations. I remembered reading about something called sleep paralysis before. It seemed to fit the immobility, the pressure on the chest, the hallucinations. Some articles said it was harmless. Others mentioned it was tied to stress or irregular sleep schedules. That made sense, I guessed. My life had been chaos lately, but the explanation didn't make me feel any better. I couldn't shake the feeling that something else had been there, something conscious, watching me. I didn't notice it until the sun came up. When I got out of bed and stretched, I looked up and saw faint marks on the ceiling above where I had been lying. They weren't deep, but they were there, 5 thin scratches, like someone had dragged fingernails across the plaster. I tried to tell myself they had always been there and I just hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew they hadn't been there the day before. Still, I painted over them with a small jar of wall paint I found in the closet. As I rolled the brush across the ceiling, I kept glancing at the bed. I didn't feel like I was alone. The silence was too complete, too heavy. That night I double-checked every lock. I shut the window. I left the bathroom light on. But a part of me already knew it was going to happen again. I didn't want to go to sleep the next night, but exhaustion always wins eventually. I spent most of the evening trying to distract myself, watching videos, reading articles, even listening to music with headphones in. But as the hours dragged on, my eyelids grew heavier, and the anxiety I felt the night before started to creep back in. I kept looking around the apartment, expecting something to move just out of sight, but everything remained still. It was too quiet, not peaceful, just unnaturally silent, like the air was holding its breath. Around 2:30 a.m. I finally gave in. I turned off the light and lay back down, wrapping the blanket tight around myself like a shield. I focused on my breathing, trying to calm the building tension in my chest. My mind kept going back to those scratches on the ceiling. No matter how many times I told myself they didn't mean anything, the image stuck with me. What could have left marks like that? And why directly above where I was sleeping? I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember was waking up again completely paralyzed. It was the same as before. My eyes were open. I was fully aware. But I couldn't move. Not a finger. Not even my lips. The pressure on my chest returned, heavier than the night before, like something was pinning me down with more intent. This time, though, it wasn't just the sensation. There was something in the room. I saw it standing in the corner by the closet. At first it looked like just a shadow, like maybe the curtain had moved or a coat was hanging from the door. But the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't part of the room. It was shaped like a person, tall, thin, no distinct features, just a dark outline, but the darkness around it didn't match the rest of the room. It seemed thicker, somehow deeper, like it was absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. It didn't move, it didn't make a sound, but I felt it watching me. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't look away. My eyes were locked on that shape in the corner. There was this overwhelming dread building in my stomach, like if I blinked, it would be closer, but I couldn't blink, and the thing never moved. The paralysis broke suddenly, and I gasped like I had just come up for air after drowning. I scrambled to the edge of the bed, turned on the light, and pointed it toward the closet. There was nothing there, but the closet door was open. I was certain I had closed it before going to sleep. I always closed it. It didn't even stay open on its own. It had a slight tilt that made it swing shut. I stood there, staring into the empty closet, trying to find a reason. Maybe I didn't latch it properly. Maybe it had swung open because of a draft, but the window was shut. The air was still. I left the lights on for the rest of the night. The next morning, I walked around the apartment like I was in a daze. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. I kept catching myself checking the corners of the room, avoiding the mirror above the bathroom sink, double-checking that the closet door was shut. Later that day, I noticed something else. In the dust on the floor just inside the closet, there were faint footprints, not shoe prints, bare feet, small, narrow, and leading out toward the bed. And I hadn't opened that closet at all. By the third night, I was on edge the moment the sun began to set. The fear wasn't just in my head anymore, it had crept into my body, settling under my skin like static. Every little noise made me jump. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the wooden floorboards when the building settled, even the sound of my own breathing, it all felt amplified, unnatural. I didn't want to be in that apartment, but I also didn't know where else to go. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that sleep paralysis could explain everything, but deep down, something was shifting. This didn't feel like a disorder. It felt like a presence. I left the closet shut that evening and wedged a chair in front of it, just to be safe. I don't know what I thought that would do, but it gave me a sliver of control. I even left a nightlight plugged in near the bed. It was meant to ease the anxiety, but the dim glow only made the shadows in the corners look deeper. Still, I tried to act normal, ate a late dinner, brushed my teeth, checked the locks. I lay down just before 2 a.m., fully dressed, phone in hand. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember waking up again. Same paralysis, same pressure on my chest. But this time was different. This time, it didn't feel like something was watching me from across the room. It felt like something was in the bed with me. I couldn't turn my head, but I felt it just behind me, like it had curled up along my back. The blanket was still covering me, but I felt the weight of another body, cold, heavy, not breathing. The sensation was so real it made my skin crawl. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. I couldn't even breathe right. Every shallow inhale sounded like it was being echoed by something else. Like I wasn't the only one breathing. And then came the voice. It was faint, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't. I know what I heard. A low, breathy whisper that sounded like it came from directly beneath the mattress, not from the room, not even from the bed. It said my name, not the name people know me by now. My full name, the one only my family used when I was a child. A name I hadn't heard in years. No one in my life now even knows it. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. All I could do was lie there, eyes wide open, with something whispering my name from under the bed. When it finally ended, I bolted upright, heart slamming in my chest. The nightlight was still on, casting a pale circle across the floor. The closet door was shut, chair still in place. Nothing had moved. The room was perfectly still. I stood up, my legs shaking, and looked around. No sign of anything unusual, but when I turned back toward the bed, I saw it. The fitted sheet was bunched up in one spot near the edge, like something had pushed up from underneath. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the corner of the room with the lights on, phone in hand, watching the bed like it might move on its own. The next morning, I slid my phone under the mattress and hit record before I left for work. I needed to know if anything happened while I wasn't home. When I got back that evening, I listened to the audio. It was mostly silencers of nothing, but at exactly 3:12 a.m. there was a sound, breathing, slow, deliberate, and not mine, and just before the recording cut off, it said my name again. I didn't go to work the next day. I couldn't. I stayed in bed all morning with the curtains drawn, feeling like I was losing my grip on what was real. I kept replaying that recording, over and over, hoping I'd hear something different. Hoping I could convince myself it was just interference or my own breath distorted somehow, but it wasn't. The breathing had a rhythm, intentional, and the voice was unmistakably real. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't my imagination. Something was in that room with me. I couldn't bring myself to sleep there again that night. I thought about booking a motel, crashing at a friend's place, anything, but every time I picked up my phone I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That I was being haunted by something in my sleep, that I was hearing voices under my bed? No one would understand. Worse, they'd think I was unstable. By sunset I convinced myself to stay one more night. Just one more. I needed to know if it was real, or if my mind was unraveling. I was terrified, but there was also this sick need to see it through. I set up my phone again, but this time, I positioned it on the dresser across the room, angled toward the bed. I propped it up and hit record just before lying down. The nightlight was still on. I left it plugged in and kept a flashlight beside me just in case. I didn't even try to fall asleep. I just laid there, waiting. But sleep always finds you when you least want it. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke up frozen again. My eyes opened and I knew instantly it was back. The air was dense, like I was breathing through water. I couldn't move, couldn't even twitch a finger, but I could feel it. This time, not behind me, not under the bed. It was standing next to me. The shape towered beside the mattress, inches from my face. I couldn't see it clearly, but it blocked out the soft glow of the nightlight. A void in the shape of a person. I could hear it breathing slow and ragged, like its lungs were full of dust. And then, it leaned down. I didn't see it move, but suddenly I felt its weight near my head. The mattress tipped. The blanket tightened around my chest like something was pressing down with both hands. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even close my eyes. I felt something brush my cheek cold and dry, like paper skin. It whispered something again, but this time it wasn't my name. It said, "We remember." Then it was gone. I sat up the second I was able to move. My entire body was trembling. I grabbed the phone, stopped the recording, and watched the footage with my heart racing. At first, nothing. Just me lying there, still under the blanket. Then, at 3:06 a.m., the frame shimmered slightly. The image distorted for just a moment, like static. And for a single second, something passed in front of the lens. A silhouette. Thin, unnaturally tall, no features. Just a shadow that slid into frame and then disappeared. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the figure. It was the timestamp. At 3:06, the figure entered the room. But I didn't wake up until 3:12, which means it was watching me for 6 full minutes, and I never even knew. I didn't go back to sleep after that. I sat in the corner of the room, knees pulled to my chest, the nightlight still glowing weakly against the far wall. The video replayed in my mind on a loop those 6 minutes I'd been watched without knowing. I kept staring at the closet, at the shadows under the bed, flinching every time the building creaked or a car passed outside. My skin crawled with every sound, real or imagined. By morning I'd made up my mind I was done. I packed a duffel bag with what little I needed, some clothes, my phone, wallet, and charger. I didn't even bother cleaning up. I just wanted to be gone. I left the apartment around 8 a.m. and checked into a motel 20 miles outside the city. Somewhere I hoped the thing couldn't follow. Somewhere clean, bland, and full of bright, artificial light. The room was small and smelled faintly of bleach, but I didn't care. I spent the day trying to stay awake, switching between news articles, podcasts, and mindless videos, anything to keep my brain occupied. But the fatigue eventually caught up with me. Around midnight, I laid down on the bedclothes still on. Every light in the room turned up to the highest setting. I didn't want to sleep, but my body gave up, and then it happened again. I woke up in the middle of the night, not from a dream, but with that same cold realization I couldn't move. Only this time, something was different. The room was brighter than my apartment, yet I couldn't see clearly. Everything looked slightly blurred, like I was staring through glass smeared with oil. My limbs were heavy, numb, and worst of all, the mirror on the far wall mounted above the dresser was showing something that didn't make sense. In the reflection I saw myself lying on the bed, paralyzed. That part was normal. But behind me, standing over the mattress, was the figure, the same dark hollow shape I'd seen in the apartment. But in the mirror, it wasn't a shadow anymore. It had form, texture. Its skin was grayish, stretched too tight over a skeletal frame. Its face was empty, just smooth, sunken indentations where eyes should have been. Its hands hovered inches above my body, long bony fingers curling downward like claws. I couldn't turn to look at it directly. I could only watch through the reflection as it leaned down closer, closer to my sleeping body. Then, something strange happened. In the mirror, my reflection blinked. My real body couldn't move, but my reflection did. It turned its head toward the figure. It saw it, and it smiled. I woke up gasping, heart hammering against my ribs, drenched in sweat. I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, avoiding my own eyes in the mirror. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Back in the motel room, I grabbed my phone, desperate to record a video, a voice memo, something to prove this was real. But when I turned on the screen, I froze. There was a new video in my gallery. I hadn't recorded anything since leaving the apartment. The video was just under 7 minutes long. I opened it. It showed me sleeping. In the motel room, from the corner, the same angle the mirror would have had. At the 5-minute mark, something stepped into the frame. The figure, clearer than ever. It moved slowly, deliberately, until it was standing right beside the bed. And then the camera started to shake, slightly at first, like someone holding it had begun breathing harder. The image grew unstable. In the final seconds, the screen went black. But not before I heard something whispered in the same dry, crumbling voice. Not my name, just one word. Home, and then silence. The worst part, I checked the mirror. There were fingerprints on the glass. From the inside,